Hey guys, this is Clinton Jeff from UnleashThePhones.com, and this is my review of the Lenovo A6000. Lenovo announced this phone back in January at CES 2015. The phone was announced specifically to be an affordable 4G LTE smartphone for India, and it's been on sale over here for about a month at Rs 6,999. Considering the specs of this phone, that price tag is pretty darn awesome. Here's what I think about the Lenovo A6000. Alright, starting with design, considering Lenovo made the beautiful Vibe X2, it's kind of hard to see how the same team might have designed the A6000. Sure, it's not the worst phone design in the world, but it really isn't anything exciting. It's a very generic design with a matte black color panel and is mostly made out of hard plastic. Measuring 141 by 70 by 8.2 millimeters and weighing in at 128 grams, it's pretty easy to use one-handed, which is appreciated considering most phone sizes nowadays. At the front of this phone is a 5-inch 720p IPS display that works out to a pixel density of about 294 ppi, which isn't too bad at all for a phone in this price range. Honestly, you won't make out individual pixels in the screen unless you hold it unnaturally close to your face. The display itself is pretty good with very vibrant colors. Viewing angles are okay and it gets decently bright enough. In fact, it gets bright enough that it is very easily usable in outdoor sunlight. All in all, considering the price tag, it's a really good display, but I should note that the touch sensitivity feels a little rougher compared to the Eureka or the Xiaomi Redmi 1S. Above the display, there's a centrally located earpiece with the front-facing camera on one side and the ambient light sensor and proximity sensor on the other side. Below the display are the usual three capacitive keys for menu, home and back. Moving on to the rest of the phone, at the top you have the micro USB charging port and the 3.5mm audio jack, while at the bottom you have no ports whatsoever except for a tiny pinhole for the main microphone. Similarly, on the left side you have no ports or buttons whatsoever, but on the right side you have the power button and the volume rocker key. Coming to the back, you'll see the Lenovo branding right in the center with the 8-megapixel camera up top, a single LED flash and a tiny pinhole for the noise cancelling microphone. Towards the bottom of the back panel you'll also see the loudspeaker grills with the Dolby logo right in the center. Yes, indeed, this phone boasts Dolby audio, but I'll talk about that later on. All in all, the Lenovo A6000 looks okay enough for a phone in this price range. Considering the awesome specs, the boring design isn't that big of a deal. One thing that is strangely missing on the A6000 though is that there is no notification LED anywhere on the phone. This is a pretty useful feature that comes standard with most phone brands nowadays, so it's kind of strange to see Lenovo not put this into this phone. This means you'll have to check for notifications the old-fashioned way by either listening for a ringtone or by checking the phone itself. Alrighty, coming to hardware. The Lenovo A6000 is powered by a 1.2 GHz quad-core Qualcomm Snapdragon 410, which has 64-bit support and 1 GB of RAM. Overall performance is pretty decent, though if you have too many apps running in the background, you will see some slowdown and lag creep in when you're switching between apps. As a result, you can play almost any Android game on the A6000. For example, Asphalt 8 works just fine, though in very processor-intensive moments, you might see a couple frame drops now and then. Apart from that, there's only 8 GB of internal storage, out of which you can only use 4.5 GB worth, but thankfully there is a micro SD card slot so you can move apps to the SD card if you want to. It's also worth mentioning that the A6000 is a dual SIM card phone. That being said, only SIM card slot 1 supports Indian 4G, while SIM card slot 2 maxes out at 2G or Edge. Coming to software, the Lenovo A6000 runs Android 4.4.4 KitKat with Lenovo's Vibe UI on top. Lenovo has stated that they will be bringing along an update to Android 5.0 Lollipop for the A6000, and the UI is generally the same as what we saw on the Vibe X2, but with obviously fewer features. Just like the other Chinese OEMs like Vivo, Xiaomi or Xiaomi, there is no app drawer on Lenovo's UI. Instead, all your apps and widgets are listed right out in a collection of home screens right there. As you'd expect, you can have as many home screen panels as you want, and there even is a little Themes app built in. Of course, in case you don't like the UI, you can always install another Android launcher on top of this. For example, you can install the Google Now launcher, which works just fine on the A6000. Moving on, the drop-down menu is pretty much the same as what you see on other Android phones, with a useful list of toggles at the top and all the notifications below it. There's also the usual list of Google apps pre-installed, and Lenovo also has their Sync It and Share It apps pre-installed as well. All in all, Lenovo's Vibe UI is nice enough, but it isn't nearly as customizable as MIUI on Xiaomi phones or CyanogenOS on the Eureka. Coming to messaging, it's easy enough on that nice large screen because you can type very comfortably. Though Lenovo's keyboard isn't necessarily my favorite keyboard, I would rather install SwiftKey instead. Apart from that, it handles multimedia pretty much the same as any Android phone, with a nice little gallery of your images and a neat little Lenovo music player pre-installed as well. Speaking of music, as I mentioned before, this is a phone that boasts two Dolby approved speakers at the back. The dual features at the back sound pretty good and they can get very loud without any distortion at all. If you're looking for a phone with great audio at this price point, here you go. Alrighty, coming to the camera. The Lenovo A6000 boasts a very impressive 8 megapixel camera at the back. There's also a single LED flash and a front-facing 2 megapixel camera for selfies. Lenovo's camera app is pretty okay and has all the functionality that you'd expect from a phone that runs Android. It's not the same nice camera app that was on the Vibe X2, but it still has a bunch of scene modes built in, including a panorama and a HDR mode. Coming to image quality, images taken in proper daytime situations were pretty okay with a solid amount of detail and decent color reproduction. Images sometimes look slightly washed out, but all in all, considering the price tag, that camera is pretty decent. In low light situations, the camera still performs quite well. Sure, there's a little bit of noise that creeps in, but pictures are clear and slightly better than what I got with the Eureka or the Redmi Note. That being said, the LED flash tends to ruin images by casting a very annoying yellow tint. As always guys, I have a whole bunch of camera samples from the Lenovo A6000 right over at UnleashThePhones.com, just in case you want to see how good or bad that camera actually is. Coming to video quality, the Lenovo A6000 can record up to 720p HD resolution. That's pretty appreciated for a phone in this price range, and video quality is pretty similar to image quality and decent enough to show off. Like I mentioned earlier, if you want to check out the video sample by itself, you can go right over to UnleashThePhones.com. Coming to call quality, the A6000 managed to handle calls pretty well. There's no network reception issues and I was able to hear people through that earpiece pretty okay. Coming to battery life, the Lenovo A6000 is powered by a 2300 mAh battery, which is pretty decent considering the specs. On moderate usage with a couple phone calls, and a little bit of web browsing and about half an hour worth of listening to music, I was very easily able to get back home at the end of the day with some battery percentage left. All things considering, that's pretty decent battery life. Alright, to conclude, at a price tag of Rs 6,999, the Lenovo A6000 is incredible value for money. Performance is solid, build quality is pretty good, the display and battery life is decent, the camera is okay, the audio is pretty good, and heck, there's even 4G LTE support. What's not to love? That being said, the omission of a notification LED is kind of annoying. Honestly, I'm really not sure why Lenovo chose not to put that one little feature in this phone. It's also worth noting that as much value for money as the Lenovo A6000 is, it doesn't really have any one single advantage over the Eureka or the Xiaomi Redmi 2, apart from the fact that it is cheaper than the Eureka, but it's almost exactly the same price as the Xiaomi Redmi 2. But then again, Lenovo also has more service centers here in India than the other two phone brands. The only other phone in the same price range is the 2015 Moto E, but I really do think the A6000 has better specs than Motorola's phone. At the end of the day, I do think the Lenovo A6000 has more value for money than the 2015 Moto E, but between this and the Xiaomi Redmi 2, they're both phones that are pretty awesome and will probably keep you happy. Alright guys, so that's what I think about the Lenovo A6000. As always, if you guys have any questions about this phone, you can let me know right in the comment section below, or check out the detailed post right over at UnleashThePhones.com. And as always, if you like this video, maybe hit the like button and maybe subscribe because that would be appreciated. And that's about it. Thanks for watching guys.